look at all that money, yeah, the money that they spend. Take another look now and take some time for hemp. I don't cut trees for paper, cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yeah, it's time for hemp. Oh, an acre of hemp makes 20 barrels of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rest. Well, right now it's time for hemp.
Thank you for taking time for hemp. I'm your host, Casper Leach. On the program today, we'll be having Paul Stanford joining us as one of our moderators. Everybody knows Paul. He's been with the program for a long time. We've also got another great activist as well who'll be acting as a moderator, and her name is Anndrea Hermann. And Anndrea, I'm going to let you introduce our panel as they come on today.
All right. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to having the pleasure today of sitting up in the Asheville Parkland region of Manitoba with Chris Federowich. Chris Federowich is with Federowich Farms and is the vice president of the Parkland Industrial Hemp Growers. Chris is a third-generation farmer and second-generation hemp producer, and alongside his mother, they cultivate 7,000 acres of mixed grain and special crops in Manitoba. Federowich Farms is a founding member of the Parkland Industrial Hemp Growers Co-op, and I spent 7 summers up here with the Federowiches working on my initial hemp research. So this is my old stomping ground, so it's great to have a good excuse to come up here and visit. Federowich Farms is one of the first and largest hemp growers in Canada. They're pedigreed seed growers. They're also members of the Canadian Seed Growers Association. They've held board seats with the Seed Buckthorn Association, Hemp Trade Alliance, and also was awarded a Conservation Farm Family of the Year. Chris is following in his lead of his late father, Joey, and, continuing to educate people about the cultivation of industrial hemp. So I'd like to welcome Chris Federowich to the program this morning.
Thanks, Anndrea.
All right. So, what were we talking about with Chris? We're going to talk about some basic farming. So, Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about what the Parkland Industrial Hemp Growers are?
The Parkland Industrial Hemp Growers basically is a board, a cooperative, actually. We started off basically with starting a seed growing type of situation. We have a producer group, I guess, or a group of guys who grow different seed varieties for us, including myself. So that's a big thing, obviously. We're working on different seed varieties to accommodate the people who are processing grain at this point in time, the people who are in food development companies, in the food development industry. So we basically initially wanted to be growing seed varieties specifically for them. So we have a breeders group and a breeding program. So what we want to do, obviously, is supply food processing facilities with the grain that they're looking for.
And some of those great qualities that you're breeding for would be looking at those essential fatty acid profile, the gamma-linolenic, and also looking at seed size.
Absolutely. GLA is a big thing. People want high GLA content. Taste is a big thing. So, it doesn't matter how big the seed is or what it yields, it has to taste good. So that's what we're kind of basing our work on. Also, and down the pipeline is becoming, a disease-resistant type of situation also for seed varieties. We want it to be a high-yielding variety. Obviously, for farmers to want to purchase the seed, there's obviously GLA content, there is seed size, there is taste for the people who are developing food products with the seed. But yet also, you have to have yield. You have to have, some disease resistance built into some of the seed for farmers to want to use their product.
Yeah, so that leads us into the concept of looking at, what is a pedigreed seed grower. So now we understand that the Parkland Industrial Hemp Growers is a co-op. You're involved in breeding programs and working with your producer groups on developing those And what is the relationship when it comes to, now you've got it, now you're starting to do the seed breeding, and what's the relationship that brings in when you start working with like ag extension offices?
As far as that is concerned, we do the best we can to work with, obviously, Manitoba government as far as extension offices are concerned, to get the most possible that we can as a cooperative, from them to make our job a success. And off that is basically working with every other hemp company that's out there. We have a website that's just getting rebuilt at this point in time. So people that are in the business of hemp, we want them to come to us. We want to sell them hemp seed. We want them to look at our hemp seed, look at our varieties, see if that's what they want. We are, we're developing varieties that give a lot of people more yield, more bang for their buck, basically. Great tasting nuts, high GLA content, and when it comes to processing, basically what you want to do is dehull hemp and get the most yield out of that. You take so much hemp per pound as far as off my fill is concerned cleaned, and you want to have as much as possible dehulled nut from a pound of hemp. So, those percentages, whether it be 5%, 10%, 15% more as opposed to before, is more money in the processor's pocket, more money in the food developer's pocket. So that's what we're shooting for.
Yeah, when it comes to farming, we are talking about what is our farm gate. So let's just switch, because we have a bit of idea about what the Parkland Industrial Hemp grows. Now let's talk about some basic agronomics. So can you share with us some bits about what would be fertilizer, land preparation, machine requirements?
It's not rocket science to grow hemp. Obviously it doesn't like its feet wet. I've grown plenty of different varieties of plenty of different commodities on my farm my whole life. When it comes down to it, at the end, it's all about conditions. It's all about a bit of a growing season. If you get any type of growing season, you'll have a great crop. It doesn't matter. The seed variety, I guess, is important supposedly, obviously, but you get your seed. It's germed at a certain percentage. You put it in the ground. If it's high moisture, any moisture in the ground, you're going to put it in a half an inch. You're basically going to use the same economics as you would to grow wheat. And, you're going to get the same result type of situation. You don't want to over-fertilize or anything like that, but use the same practices as you would to grow wheat as far as fertility is concerned, in 46 and phosphate and stuff like that. But it's the science is in, or I guess the hard part is getting off the field.
And so when you're talking about getting it off the field, so, once it goes in, those are all going in with machines that you have right here on the farm and any various types of seeding equipment. We talked about the fertility being close to wheat and the dominant being making sure that you're getting enough nitrogen in there because it is nitrogen. So what is, one of the things you talked about in the breeding program that you're working for is disease resistance. What are some of the diseases that you have seen in the field?
We're seeing Carantina in hemp. We're seeing Aster yellow in hemp. You use the same economics to grow hemp as you would wheat, but we're seeing the same disease characteristics as we are in canola, especially last season where we had a big hit of Carantina and a big hit of Aster yellow. And you're seeing those same things, the same diseases that would affect canola as you would to affect hemp. It's an oil crop, so it's a pollinating crop. It takes up that kind of situation. So you got to watch out for stuff like that. There's nothing really you can do at this point in time. There's no registered fungicides for hemp or anything like that. But, as a conventional farmer, we're hoping to see some of these things come in the pipeline. Basically, farmers want to grow hemp. If they're going to grow hemp, they want to make sure that's going to happen. They want to get everything they possibly can if it's that type of season to ensure that they have good yield. Because unfortunately, at the end of the day, it's about dollars and cents. And, people that are growing that commodity have to put money in their pocket. There's expenses to be paid, so you want to have that bang for your buck.
And so talking about harvesting, if a producer calls you and says, I'm interested in growing hemp, but I'm concerned about how I'm going to harvest this, what's some basic advice that you could give to a producer when it comes to harvesting and prepping your machines to try to make it easier on you?
Basically, make sure your machines are prepped way post-harvest. Seeding this commodity is just like anything else. Watch your fan speed. You don't want to crack the seed. It's very gentle. You're not doing any seed treatments on the seed, so it's kind of basic as far as putting it down, certain pounds per acre. We're basically running 20 to 25 pounds an acre to get what you're looking for. It doesn't matter what germination the seed is. But combine, under your combine, in your combine to make this work. A lot of the brand new combines, as far as John Deere's are concerned and cases are concerned, are it can do a good job right out of the box. You have the P2 guards underneath it because it does wrap. It wraps quickly and it does burn quickly. So these are things that you want to have. You want to have your ducks in a row when it comes to harvest, because if you jump into it, it could become a big issue, especially with the older combines. You're on old Case A, 2188, 1688, and there is a large volume of modifications of these combines. And I just suggest to farmers that if they're getting into it, make sure you have your harvesting equipment, the way it should be, because if you don't and you walk into a hemp field, guys have destroyed combines before, written combines off in 100, 200 yards.
And that's really operator error. So Chris is advising, really slow down, pay attention to what's going on, making sure your machines are prepped, everything is sharp and free, and you're examining that combine as you go through. One of the conversations Chris and I were having last night about, as we move forward in the U.S. and other parts of the world, and what would be your advice to a producer who's coming in who's, industrial hemp has not been grown in that area. They have not known varieties and how they're impacting. What is an advice to a producer group? Let's say, what would be one of the first things that you would suggest?
I would suggest that don't go all in. Grow if you're what size of acre farmer you're at. If you're a 2,000 acre farmer, just getting fit as opposed to your level of farming. Don't grow 30-year production into hemp. Grow a quarter. Grow 80 acres. Grow 50 acres. Grow 20 starts. Get a feel for it, get your harvesting equipment ready, and that way maybe possibly down the road you can get into a bit of a situation. Don't go all in. Do not consume a lot of your acres into hemp right off the bat. Make sure you have your processing up to snuff. Make sure your food development companies are there. Make sure the bills are paid. Feel comfortable growing hemp. Go in nice and slow. Ease yourself in the situation, and then maybe you can think about a third of your production into hemp. But for me, I'd rather see a lot of farmers growing little acres of hemp as opposed to less farmers growing a lot of acres of hemp. It's just spreading your risk for the farmers, and you're spreading your risk for food development companies and processes also.
Yeah, so it's, again, we're here talking about, farmers talking about, minimizing risk to increase your farm gain in the long run. So, Chris, we've got a few minutes here. We have a couple minutes left. What would be a typical rotation that you would use and advise?
As far as hemp's concerned, it's good rotation, especially if you have a good catch. It could work the other way. If you have a rough season where you get high moisture, cool temperatures off the start, you could really have a field with hemp. Same as any of the commodity, basically. If you have the conditions, you're going to do a good job. You can run hemp off any commodity, really. With the way things work these days, it doesn't even matter what you're doing. Lots of guys want to see it off canola. Basically, what it comes down to in the end is if you're putting hemp in a post-wheat commodity the year previous, what you want not to see is wheat volunteer or any type of cereal volunteer in that hemp. Those companies are gluten-free. They do not want cereal or any part of that situation in their sample, so you got to watch it. The good thing with that is if you do come off a wheat commodity the year previous, the wheat will go short, the hemp obviously goes tall. Pick up your header, don't go for that extra, maybe half a pound at the bottom of the plant to pick up while you're taking in probably, maybe a 4-bushel wheat crop at the bottom. Pick up that header, take hemp only inside your header, because when it comes down to it, your sample is most important at the end of the day. You want a good sample. Most facilities, most companies do not want to see a cereal crop in your sample. Canola is easy to clean out of wheat. Canola is easy to clean out of hemp. Wheat is very difficult to clean out of hemp, so you got to be careful with that.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank Chris for his time this morning, and thank all the Parkland Industrial Hemp Growers and the Federowich Farms for all their efforts and continuing to educate people around the world about the cultivation of industrial hemp and developing these varieties that, we will be looking in the United States to, work with the Parkland Industrial Hemp Growers on, introduction of those varieties into the United States. So, Chris, I'd like to thank you for your time this morning.
You're welcome.
All right, Casper, do we have Paul on the line now?
I've been here all along since the start of the show. Steve Levine is here, too. Hi, Paul. Anndrea.
Hi,
Stanford.
Steve. How are you doing this morning?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing very good.
Great.
So next on our agenda this morning is Steve Levine with the Hemp Industry Associations, and Steve Levine is the ex-president of the Hemp Association and still sits on our board. And he has been involved in the Hemp Industry Association since 1997. And in 1999, he produced the first of 9 annual hemp festivals. And in 2000, the Santa Barbara Hemp Company, which he produced radio shows. Steve has been a longtime activist, and while retiring after 9 years as the president of the MHIA, he's continuing to be on our board. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And as you know, I also serve on the board of Vote Hemp, which is the nonprofit industrial hemp lobby group. The Hemp Industry Association, known as HIA, is also a nonprofit industrial hemp group, but we're a trade organization. So we represent businesses, industrial hemp businesses and farmers and researchers.
All right. Well, Steve, a little bit of light for us on what the current status of industrial hemp is in the U.S. Can you talk about, our federal bills, the Farm Bill, and what's happening with some of the state laws?
Right. Well, there's actually about 20 states that have passed legislation of some sort. 9 states have actually legalized it, most notably and most recently Colorado and Washington. Well, besides Colorado and Washington, Kentucky has been amazing, and we're getting strong support from their very conservative U.S. senators. So we're very encouraged. We have, like I had mentioned, many states that have legalized hemp farming and waiting on permission from the federal government, as always, to allow the states to grow hemp. This has been the situation in the past, but we're a little more encouraged now because there's been a climate change in attitudes about cannabis. I don't know what happened, but we are at a tipping point now. We're not only with industrial hemp, but in all things cannabis.
Steve, I have a question, please.
Sure.
If you were speaking before Congress or the Senate, I'm sure one of them is going to ask you straight up, why is this particular plant so valuable? Why can we not grow all the other plants and create all the other products that we keep talking about from all the other plants that are out there on the market today? Why is it that this plant is so specifically important to the farm community? I mean, seriously, we can create fuel out of varieties of plants. We can create clothing out of cotton. I mean, surely there's got to be an answer to that.
Well, I mean, of course, there's the whole confusion or misrepresentation or misspeaking about what cannabis is, because there's definitely different kinds of cannabis. But generally, we're talking about high THC and no THC, and industrial hemp has no THC. The problem here is that we cannot grow the plant. Everything about all the products, our industrial hemp products, are legal in the United States. Everything is legal but the plant. So, in other words, it would be like outlawing poppy seed bagels being cooked in the United States, but we can import the bagels from Canada. They'll be 3 times more expensive and they'll be stale, but it's legal. But the plant itself is not legal to grow. So this is our main problem. Why poppy seed muffins and bagels are legal, but industrial hemp food is controversial? It's silly. There's some farming going on now. I'm not a little unclear about that. Anndrea may be more in tune with that than I am. But we are making incredible progress. And we are very close to actually legalizing all things cannabis. And I'm looking forward to that. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Apparently, we're going to be able to create a huge job base, not just in America, but around the world. Will this have an impact on Wall Street? Will it take the need for Wall Street out of the equation? Will it create more of a cottage industry, not just in our own backyard, but globally?
That's a big question with a lot of speculation required that I am not qualified to answer. I mean, to replace Wall Street, I don't know about that. But will it be a big time industry? Yes, I totally believe it will be. As we move forward, we need alternative forms of energy. And this is one of the potential values of industrial hemp, is creating hemp fuel, We're actually a long ways off from it, but it is a possibility. And hopefully within the next few years, we can add fuel to the many important uses of hemp, including building materials and food and clothing, paper, etc.
All right. Well, Steve, thank you so much for your time today, and we really appreciate
pleasure.
all the efforts of the Hemp Industry Association's Vote Hemp and the Hemp History Week team today.
Thank you, Anndrea, and everybody, Casper, Paul, love you guys. Take care.
All right. So, Summer, are you on the line there?
Hello, I'm here.
Hi, Summer. How are you doing today?
Well, I'm Summer Star Haeske. I've got Enviro Textiles with my mother, Barbara Philippone. Long story short, I've pretty much grown up with hemp. My mother's been traveling the world making the hemp fabrics you see on today's marketplace. I was 10 years old sitting in Colorado State Senate hearings way back when. Back then we kind of were going, hey, hemp's good, it's great, let us grow it. And, we even got far enough to where we only lost by one vote all those years ago. And, of course, today we've got a whole lot of great, credible information and more amazing products to really push it through. Enviro Textiles is a textile fabric supplier. So we stock over 100 various hemp fabrics in the U.S. To really give a good variety to brands wanting to implement hemp into their line. So we've got everything from 100% hemps to various blends and every weight and weave and color you could think of now. We do supplying to the brands that are out there making the hemp products. And of course, those brands are what are so important to be out in the public pushing, the products that we're really wanting to see people finally get to take advantage of and enjoy and create better health for themselves.
That's great. Well, thanks so much. So all the work that you and your mother have done throughout time to really put, hemp on people's backs and, pimping out rides and from the couture line to the very simple plain basic T-shirt. So we're really thankful to have you and your mother part of the industry. Now, Paul, did you have any questions for Summer?
What do you think the impact of Colorado's changing environment is? Are you involved in any attempts to establish hemp cultivation there in Colorado?
Well, absolutely. We're really excited over here in Colorado. As many of the listeners know, Colorado's been pushing forward pretty quickly. And, the biggest thing that we've really seen and some things that have surprised us out here in Colorado is really the farmers' reactions. That's the most important supporters that we need right now to get hemp for industry back in the U.S. is knowing we've got the farmers to grow it, first of all. There's some areas of the state that may be a bit more conservative than others that we thought, okay, it's going to be more of a push and let's get out the best of the best to show them what can be done. We found that they were actually calling us going, hey, we realize we need this. We have a lot of issues in Colorado with how dry our climate is and being able to have these drought resistant crops. A fourth generation farmer gal on the Western Slope I talked to recently said, we're losing all our fruit to the late freezes in the spring and then everything else to the droughts in the summer. And we have nothing left. We need this or there will be no future family farm here. That's been a huge thing in Colorado is knowing we're going to have the farmers support that's going to help show our state government and hopefully, our full federal government that, this is really needed and it's needed for our farmers, it's needed for our workers, and it's needed for healthy products for us, and on top of the ability to maybe get back on this global exchange and be part of this whole hemp network. The U.S. has become the largest consumer of hemp-based products, and it's time we get our hands in on those first steps and maybe supply other countries with the hemp that we're going to be able to grow. All
right. So, in talking about the growing of it, what part of the plant, for those that are out there that don't know, what part of the plant goes into the textiles? Now, Chris spoke earlier about grain production into food. What part of the plant goes into the fiber production?
Well, of course, hemp grows like a big stalk, and of course, the seed's coming off the top, and the stalk is what's holding our fiber. Now, there's a outer ribbon of that stalk, so it's almost like almost any kind of a twig. If you were to snap it in half and pull it, you almost see that outer core that kind of creates its own little strip of sorts. And that ribbon is where the textile grade fiber is coming from in that particular strain. And of course, it then has to go through combing to then grade out the various fiber lengths. That's something that comes up an awful lot is, why are hemp fabrics so much stronger than other natural fibers? That's something we all rave about, is that this hemp product's going to last forever for you, besides it being healthy and cool. And, the best explanation to that for people is, if you imagine that hemp fiber coming out of the ribbon, and that can be 8 to 18 inches long, that fiber. So it's like a hair. You've got this long hair, where a cotton fiber is anywhere from a 1/2 inch to 2 inches long. So when you're spinning those little hair fibers into a yarn that's going to then go into making a fabric, imagine all that extra length of the fiber all spinning together. And that's where our durability is coming in, is we've got these long, amazing hemp fibers that I like to say is like angel hair, because it really does look like it. And that's what's creating these extra long spins in the yarns that are holding them together like no other fiber can. So that ribbon is really the least amount of usage in the hemp plant. So when we're looking at the whole hemp plant, there's only approximately 13% of that stalk that's actually ribbon that goes to fiber. So within that 13%, you can imagine, a quarter of that is the longest grade A type fibers, and it gets shorter down to those 8 inches.
So that is the bast fiber, much akin to bark. It's the outer fiber that's the longest and strongest plant fiber. Now, I know there's one fellow who says he's going to cultivate 60 acres of hemp. Have you had any contact with that farmer?
That would be our Ryan Laughlin here in Colorado. He is growing as we speak. He's really excited to kind of pave the way and show the proof of concept that, yes, it can be done, and we're doing it. And I'm actually honored to be holding a discussion group with Ryan here in a couple of weeks. Colorado's having their first Arise Music Festival, which is bringing some amazing speakers and workshops, and really trying to unite the like minds and bringing people together here in Colorado to help lead the way and bring people together and form a solid green army as we move forth, in other words. And it's going to be quite the event. They've actually signed a 7-year contract with an amazing organic farm that I have to say I was really surprised to hear these guys went for it, because this place hasn't allowed anything to touch the soils for over 30 years. But they're going, you know what? We're all facing a time where we need to come together and whatever it takes, pretty much. So we're really excited about that coming up here in Colorado soon as well.
Yeah, and everybody will definitely wanting to stop by the EnviroTextile booth, because Summer puts on an amazing booth. She does amazing fashion shows. Now, Summer, one of the things that I think are, a question that we're going to have is, all right, once we have, and we will, once we're growing and cultivating industrial hemp in the United States, do we have facilities in the United States that can transform hemp and take this bast fiber, these ribbons that you described to us, and make that into clothing. Do those facilities exist? And if they do, can you talk a little bit about how EnviroTextiles is participating in that?
Well, it's unfortunate that back during the Great Depression, our nation lost its natural fiber textile industry. Those old factories were selling off their equipment for pennies on the dollar, and many of them pulled overseas. Now, we do have some capabilities here in the U.S. For example, we are spinning hemp yarns right here in Colorado right now. We've done spinning and weaving at various facilities throughout the Carolinas and the southern states of the U.S. So we can produce the end product. What the problem is right now is that we can't actually take that ribbon and bring it to the fiber grade that needs to then get spun and woven. So we are missing some parts of that puzzle, those first few pieces, and it's really not going to require too much. Now, obviously, when we look at global positioning of hemp right now, China is known for textiles, always has, and likely always will be. They've got amazing state-of-the-art facilities, and if we were to try to match that, it would be approximately $150 million facility to have the capabilities to do what we do overseas. Now, we have to think about that and go, okay, is that the direction we want to go in? Of course, myself would love to see hemp fabric made in the U.S., but we also have to be realistic on, are we going to see that support to build a facility of that sort? And also, would it be the smart move for the U.S.? Because are we going to be able to compete with a country like China, where there's so many products still needed on the global marketplace that might be a little bit more wiser to begin with? It might just be a little premature to go initially right into let's make hemp fabric in the U.S. And I think something a lot of us have all been talking about is, what strain's going to grow in the U.S. And it seems that it only makes sense, and that we have some advantages and support from our neighbors up there to initially start with that hemp seed strain. And if that's the case, of course, that ribbon from that strain is not going to be a textile grade to develop the type of fabrics that we're offering on today's marketplace. It would be more of a jute like what we remember from way back in the day, and they'd have to be hand loomed on particular mechanical machines. And it's definitely possible, and it would be a novelty item. I'm sure there would be a small buyer base, but I think that all of us in the U.S. really want to see the U.S. go forward with a very strong industry base here.
Okay, Summer, we only have a few more minutes, but I think it's one of the amazing things that EnviroTextiles has done as recently is that you've become bio-preferred. Can you please tell us a little bit about bio-preferred and, what that means with the bio-preferred program?
Absolutely. Everybody knows the USDA has been certifying foods organic for a very long time now, and they have also realize they need to start certifying everything else. There are mandates being implemented stating we've got to start having healthier products. Maybe not so much because they're realizing the health of the people so much as what it's doing to the environment and taking away resources and things like that, or posing as a problem with, contamination, what have you. There's so many things with these chemical companies and these products that are, putting in all this junk for us that people are starting to realize we have to make change. So the USDA has created what's called their bio-preferred program. And what that is certifying everything under the sun, and they're literally going down to the percentage of bio-based material within that product, which is very similar to our SBP program, which was modeled together. I mean, you have to really start thinking about the full transparency of your product. If one thing in it is good, great, but then you find out later that it took formaldehyde in this big chemical bath to make it happen. And ultimately, that finished product is no longer that natural, let alone healthy for you. And then they're claiming that it can be. So, it's really incredible to see the support from the USDA. They've implemented this program that is affordable for everyone. So farmers can certify to stay-at-home moms with little sewing co-ops in their communities. I mean, everyone can get involved. It's not a third party, let's charge you a fortune. And we're really not getting down to the nitty gritty on what's the life cycle or the transparency. It's only usually covering one piece of the whole puzzle. And now we really get to see what our products are made from. And, our U.S. labeling department is what really kind of needs to be cracked down on, because it's not fair for us to not know what's in our products. And so programs like this are letting us know. And I encourage anyone out there with a company to go on to biopreferred.gov and check that program out, apply for it. This is kind of going to give us the push into, being able to fill government contracts, getting more and more support from the different government programs and agencies that are utilizing those products. Some of those agencies are becoming mandatory that they must use those products. And out of those products, they have to go with whoever has the highest bio-based percentage. So, of course, us hemp folks are on top.
That's so great, Summer. Well, thank you so much for your time. And
thank you all.
I'd like to welcome Teri Wallace with Hemp Out and Hemp and Grain Canada. So, Teri, why don't you just kick off and tell us a little bit about what Hemp Out and Hemp and Grain Canada is all about?
Okay, well, thank you for having me and inviting me, Anndrea. It's a real privilege and pleasure. Basically, Hemp Out movement was started about 4 years ago by myself and about 8 savvy women across North America. Hemp Out itself is really about a social movement in support of the hemp culture. So we simply educate, we promote, we market. We socially engage with the consumers online, offline, about all things hemp. So really what we did is we tagged it Hemp Out. The purpose was simply to educate the masses on hemp. So, we all know, hemp itself is so misunderstood, and alongside its illicit cousin, cannabis, right? So yet Hemp Out really felt a strong alliance and come together as women to collectively just bring more education to the masses. We all know that hemp is so versatile. It feeds the planet. It supports the sustainability. We saw that there was a social movement. It's got the cool factor. We really pride ourselves in being socially engaging on the social media sphere. We see food landscape changing. So we really are about educating and connecting with the consumers, watching the food trends in the marketplace and merchandising. And the girls do a great job on blogging and socially connecting with a lot of the like minds out there in the hemp and the cannabis culture, really just to show that there's a huge force and people just need to be educated. And, so that's where it came from. A bunch of girls, and it started about 4 years ago, and we've been active ever since and enjoying it and seeing what's happening. So that's where we started, Anndrea, and that's we continue to support the entire industry, both hemp and the cannabis culture.
And so, Teri, I know you have such a diverse background from, publishing, design, marketing, business administration, but also some of the things, is that you're a certified sports nutritionist. You also have your CCNH, with a natural health holistic nutrition degree. We have a lot of background, not just talking about, how can we market this and put this out there in our social media world, but when it comes to actually what hemp does in your body. And so can you us a little bit, about what the role of Hemp Grain Canada is and how that message comes across when you're talking about that, looking at the market forces when it comes to hemp foods, when focusing on the nutrition side?
Absolutely. I mean, our corporation came to life in about 4 years ago, and the corporation is Hemp and Grain Canada. I mean, what that is a devoted team of brokers, and we have an infrastructure to provide a source and service in North America, and we do particularly specialize in the hemp ingredient. And now we're working with the Canadian agriculture on the grain. So basically what we do, it's a group of us, and we all come from backgrounds, nutrition. We got clinical nutritionalists, sport nutrition. We got a food alchemist. We've got researchers, and we work towards marketing, direct selling, branding, a lot of technical support in-house to produce, private label products. Our motto is, from seed to sale, we first and foremost support the farmers. We pride ourselves in the vertical integration relationship between us, the farmer, and the consumer. So all in all, it's really a lot of our team, we kind of act more, not so much as brokers, but project managers with every project. And a lot of our business is really around the food industry. So we work together, and we really help people put food onto the market with our consulting team and all of our nutritional information, and we deal direct with, the Canadian agriculture. More importantly is all the hemp that we've been working with for the past 4 years, and it's been a lot of fun, and we see a lot of things opening up. I mean, when you talk about the major market forces, Anndrea, when it comes to hemp foods, I mean, I truly believe it's today's conscious consumer that's, they're more informed now than ever. And I mean, part of my background is an extensive Internet background. I mean, we started seeing the Internet make huge changes in the industry and how the world is shifting through the Internet, and globally and organically, the messages are spreading like wildfire. So, I mean, when you look at the market force, it's people are waking up. The world's shifting, it's transforming. Food landscape in general is more important now than ever. I mean, we have health issues such as celiac, diabetes. We've got chemical and environmental toxins, flooding the environment. There is, more regulations for growers now, more for food manufacturing, putting hemp-related food out on the marketplace. I mean, for anybody wanting to put that out, it's a daunting process to put, a food product out, let alone hemp.
Explain that a little bit. You're talking now about, so if I come to you and I say, I want to start my own hemp brand, what would be your suggestion if I say, I really like eating hulled hemp seed. I've introduced it to some of my friends. They like it. I think I want to go in and start selling this and retailing this. Can you give us just a few steps on how somebody might get that started?
Absolutely. And that's a big part of what we do. I mean, it's becoming almost mainstream. These strong brands that are up and coming are becoming very competitive. I mean, we're in a world of the me culture, so a lot of private brandings are in the heat of the market and business strategy in today's business. I mean, if you Googled hemp, you're going to see very quickly this super incredible plant can produce over 30,000 different products. So, I mean, getting to your question, first and foremost, I will always say, I hope that there is a business plan, because with no plan, that's failure right there, right? And part of it is the marketing plan. Understand, it's not just to purchase the hemp seed. There's a lot of regulations. So when I work with people and the people in the office, when we're supporting this inquiry for branding the hemp, we need to really understand that there's a lot of compliances that need to take place before you can put a product on the shelf. So the first thing is do your business plan, the marketing plan. You probably have an idea or a design concept. identify what food particularly you want to put out. Like hemp seed you can put hemp seeds out, protein or hemp oil. So identifying that. Identify your budget. Do your research. Find out your source providers, your hemp wholesalers. Do your homework. Get involved. Understand there's a lot of the alliances, the HIA, the CHTA. Those groups are there to help and support and educate, and those are important tools for anybody to help identify where they're going and how they want to put a brand and really understand what the involvement of hemp is. And, the first thing is just understanding the budget, your marketing plan, who's your target market, and then we can look at, services that we can help you with. We can consult with you. We can help you with the labeling. And you've got to comply with the Health Canadas out there and understand that it's not just putting hemp seed into a bag and putting it out there. There's a lot of things that is required. So that's part of what we do at the Hemp Out Agency, as well as other great leaders like Hemp Oil Canada. We're doing a lot of good things for private brands, and really because hemp is growing, it's got the cool factor. It's going on, right?
And you're bringing out a really good point about this collaboration that's happening within the industry. So you've got all of these, the companies are really working together to promote their brand, but then they're also not just promoting their own brand. I think what we're seeing within the hemp industry is everybody's helping to promote all of our brands, because we know that if you're successful at Hemp Out, another brand could be successful because you're going to reach somebody and they're going to buy on one retail shop and another retail shop. So that collaboration is really great. Now, Teri, we have a few minutes here. So can you tell me does Hemp Out have some fun and exciting projects that are coming up that we should be staying tuned to?
Thank you. We do. We're actually right now ready to roll out a raw hemp seed bag. Now, we never looked at Hemp Out as a brand. In fact, the whole launching of this 1 pound organic bag is actually showcasing the farmer first. So what it is, it's basically a universal bag, if you will, that's really featuring Hemp Out as the runner to help become a social voice. So, we always want to praise the farmer. We love the seed and the planet. So we wanted to bring the transparency back to the consumer by showcasing the farmer and allowing our retailer to utilize our design concept. We will be doing some custom branding for the retailer. Again, Hemp Out is not the brand. It's to support the social movement. So we're actually going to be rolling out with that in the fall and supporting our retailers that choose to do their custom brand. It helps them advertise. We help them. They help us. And overall, it's to get the seeds out there, spread the hemp seed, spread the love, get more people trying, tasting, touching this beautiful seed. The other thing is we're working with some key people in the film industry that are working on some really good documentaries. They're trying to bridge, North America and Canadian agriculture together. And so Hemp Out has been asked to, be part of that as a social media marketing direction to help showcase these documentaries that are hemp related. And so we're excited. There's a lot of great things coming out in the social media. And those are the big that are up and coming for us.
So, next on our lineup, it's an honor to start bringing in, Tony, are you on the line?
Yes. Can you hear me, Anndrea?
Yes, I sure can. Well, Tony Budden, thank you so much for taking the time. Now I'll just let you go ahead and take over. And why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what the Hemporium's all about and where you're from?
Okay, well, I'm sitting in a very dark Cape Town, South Africa. It's now Friday evening, midwinter. And Hemporium, we started in 1996, very early on for the South African market, because there was no natural and organic market. And it very much started with a piece of hemp canvas that landed in our laps. And we started making bags out of it, but very much for the kind of counterculture, almost the wear what you smoke market, because no one else really looked at the plant positively here yet. And as we learned and kind of grew ourselves and saw all the other opportunities, the construction, the paper, the oils, nutrition, we suddenly thought, hold on, this is something that is so perfect for Africa. We've got the land, we've got the people who need work, we've got the right climate, everything is lined up, but why aren't we growing this here? So we started digging around and getting more into the lobbying. And we set a very lofty goal early on and to try to showcase everything hemp has to offer. So very quickly we were making clothing, we had a body care range we developed locally, we had accessories, we were selling fabric, we were selling paper, we were importing twines and ropes. And the real temptation with hemp is you want to do everything, but often then you spread yourself really thin. So we ran like that at the same time as starting to lobby and really try and say, look, to the government, here is right in our hands. We're holding these seeds that could be jobs, houses, and food. Let us grow this plant. And it's taken a long time. It stagnated in research for more than 10 years in South Africa. Basically, the research, the companies that were doing the research just getting more and more money to do more research. And we started our research in around 1998, and it still is currently technically in research. But a big step last year, which was we got our first permit to do something that's the next level on from agricultural research, which is what's called commercial incubation research. So first time it's coming off government land onto private farms, onto community farms, and we are starting to grow the industry.
Well, that's so amazing, Tony. I mean, what you guys have been able to do in what seems like a long time, but in perspective, all of that building up and that research that seemed to be taking so long really added what I would think a lot of legitimacy to what your efforts and the efforts of your entire team were doing there in South Africa. What can you explain to us? Are there any other parts in Africa that are, following your lead?
I think in Africa, everyone looks to South Africa for the lead, but because of this, the politics here and this stagnation in research, a lot of countries have been waiting for us to step forward, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. But we are starting to hear of projects in Mozambique, in Malawi, Ghana. The challenge is there very much at the moment, and it's something it seems small, but it's something that we're really going to have to look at as an industry, is finding the right cultivars that will grow so close to the equator. A lot of the European cultivars that we are forced to do research on down here, they don't like the shorter day lengths of Africa. So to find the right cultivars is essential, and that's why we're really trying to work with the Australians. They're a few years ahead of us on that. And we've got similar climates, look at finding these varieties. And I think Summer mentioned it, even between Canada and the States, there's the variety that is going to be specific for Africa and for different conditions in Africa. That's our next big push. Politically, we've got the same issue here, canophobia. A lot of the politicians, I meet with them, they all get it. I take all our samples in, they touch and feel, and they go, wow, this is a no-brainer. But to get them to stand up politically and say, right, I'm going to be your champion in government, I'm going to drive this, that has been a little bit of a challenge. And also we run into a bit of an issue internationally with World Bank loans, IMF, USAID, all of these things still telling us that cannabis is a drug, whether you're smoking it or feeding people with it or building houses. And that can affect certain things regarding interest rates on loans, because if that situation isn't taken care of, then we're still seen as promoting a drug industry because we're growing cannabis. So what's happening in America at the moment is it's crucial to the rest of the world, because there are a lot of the third world countries that are taking their lead from America.
Yeah, so one of the questions that come in from one of our panelists, Boris, he's got questions about talking about South Africa and big problems in the ghetto populations, and I know this is something that's really true to your heart. And he's wondering if there's ever been, what the consideration is in looking at a project scheme for growing low-profile houses from field biomass. So I know that this is something that you're taking quite to heart. So can you share a little bit about, your project with building in South Africa and how you think that can help with these ghetto populations that you have?
Absolutely. We quickly saw in those meetings that we were having with your different politicians that when we pulled out the fabric and the paper and all, they were interested. But as soon as we pulled out the building materials, our samples of hemp insulation, hemp chipboard, the hempcrete, their eyes lit up, literally, and they were really interested in the building side. So we took it on ourselves to build South Africa, or Africa, as far as we know, is first total hemp house. We built it with hempcrete, hemp chipboard, hemp insulation, hemp carpets, hemp couches, hemp curtains. We oiled the wood with hemp oil. Basically took it as far as we could with making an experiential place where you could come in, touch and feel and go, hold on, I can feel the energy in this house, and I can see that most of the wall is grown in 4 months, and there's no other resource that we know of that can do that. But if you look at our project online, there's a lot of videos and information. We chose to do it at the upper end because in Africa and in most countries, there's this thing called the aspiration model, where people want to live in something that they see in the magazines or on TV, or that it's much easier to get it onto that level and filter down than it is to go in and go try to brand ourselves as low cost. Because the reality is, until we've got economies of scale, we're not going to be low cost. We've still got a long way of building the industry up to get to a level where we can compete with brick and cement on a cost level, because our big push in South Africa, and as a natural industry, is about communicating to people the difference between price and cost. We always go, well, how does a hempcrete house, how does it differ in price to brick and cement, which is the normal building material here? And obviously on price, it's a little bit more, but the cost is so much less. And that's a whole re-engineering of a culture of people when they buy something to understand the life cycle of a plant or of a product. So I'm already feeling that I'm lucky enough or blessed enough to be living in the house that we built. And my energy costs every month are a fraction of what my friends are spending. We in South Africa, we deny that we have a cold climate, but we do. We get down to pretty much close to freezing in some areas in winter, but we live in cement and brick with very little insulation. And I had a Canadian come to me the other day who said he's never been colder in a house than in South Africa. So it's a whole new introduction of bringing this idea of natural building materials in. And that's, as I said, to start at the top. The ideal is to go to the low-cost housing, to be building houses for people on the ground. Obviously, that's our ultimate aim. But as I said, it's all based around creating the industry, collaborating, looking at the moment, you see in the industry people fighting over a pie that hasn't gone into the oven yet. We get a lot of people who are suddenly waking up to the potential of hemp, and they want to get in. They want to get in and they want to control it. And the first investors often ask me, like, okay, well, how will we stop people doing this? Like, you're not getting it. What we're trying to say is this is a big enough pie for everyone. And it's the same thing you mentioned a little bit earlier. The more we help each other grow this industry, the more we can all benefit. And it's the next level, as I said, for us is getting we've got our what's now called the Department of Human Settlements. It was our Department of Housing, which is when the ANC government took over in South Africa and apartheid ended, they had to build millions and millions of houses as fast as possible because they had promised this to their voters that everyone was going to get a house. But they built these terrible concrete block, tin roof houses that are literally a fridge in the summer, in the winter, and a hothouse in the summer. Now they've changed their name. The language has changed. They're calling themselves the Department of Human Settlements. So the humanity is coming back in, and they're starting to look at communities, at the other needs, community centers, shade, transport. And they recently come to us and they're interested in building 20 low-cost houses out of hempcrete, which will be huge. And that what our government is saying to us at the moment is it might be quite a while before we can all a farmer can go to the government and say, I want to grow hemp, and then I'll create my market. They want us to create the market first. so that we can say, look, we've got an order for 20 houses. For that, we need 50 hectares of hemp. This is who's going to be growing it. This is where the community is that we're working with. This is who's processing it. This is where we're getting the seeds. And this is where the product is going. And create closed loop systems so that we can work on a project for project basis. And that obviously is a more sustainable way of doing it as well. And we learned that from the Canadians. The Canadians, the first year, everyone grew hemp and everyone tried to sell hemp at the first year at the same time. And it nearly killed the industry because there wasn't the market and there wasn't the processing facilities. So we can grow it organically that way. That is our aim, to work with the government. But obviously, the big thing is hemp needs economies of scale. So we do need the permission to grow larger amounts.
Yeah, and I think that this is something, Tony, that we're hearing throughout. We're hearing, a couple of key points. We have a lot still to do in our industry. We have a lot still to develop. We have, collaboration and communication amongst the industry and government is really vital to strategically positioning ourselves to where we can make this industry go forward. And I think South Africa has, it's really advanced in the fact that, you can bring in hemp and process it there, hemp grain. Hemp foods are legal food in South Africa. You now have these, level up from a government research trial. So, big props to you and all the farmers you're working with and your entire team for staying with industrial hemp in South Africa and really fighting for the rights of farmers there, which in turn fights for the rights for farmers all across the world.
Thank you very much. And we'd just like to see the industry stay as open as possible because for us, the reason we got involved with the cannabis plant or with hemp is that spirit of abundance and that it can provide for so much. So the minute people come to us and say, well, we want to control this, I walk away from that meeting and I just say, look, I can't deal with you. And it might be altruistic or it might be an idealist, but that is really the way that I want to conduct this business. I believe that there is so much in this plant and that it can offer, and I'm holding that vision. Obviously, we've got to do the nuts and bolts of creating the business and selling the fabric and getting the brand out there and getting people to touch and feel. That's why the clothing industry and what Summer is doing is, it's very important because it's such a tangible way for someone to experience cannabis that isn't smoking. You walk out, you can see what someone's wearing, but you have no idea what's in their fridge at home or what's, in their bathroom cabinet, what kind of cosmetics they're using. But the clothing is such a good way to get the message forward and to say, look, hold on, touch this, feel this, and you can see it's not what you thought it was. And
absolutely.
That we still.
And I tell you, I have a pair of a few things from the Hemporium fashion line, and they definitely wear really nice and have classy cuts to them. Now, Casper or Paul, did you have any questions for Tony?
Yes, I want to know how it is that your government is able to create a market for hemp goods, then still at the same time, have they developed any type of future at the taxation of it and how they're going to implement the economy of it, who's going to oversee it, or is that still also up in limbo?
Well, the challenge with Africa as a whole is we're not dealing like in Canada or most of Europe. You're dealing with your modern farmers who have all the information, have their emails, the GPS coordinates, they're online. We've got to deal here with emerging farmers, and sometimes maybe they've got an acre or two of land, and they're very spread out. And we know that it won't happen in South Africa where it just gets permission for some big commercial farmer to grow hemp. We have to involve the community farmers. We have to revitalize our rural economy. Otherwise, our townships and the ghettos around every city just keep growing with people who leave the rural areas coming to looking for non-existent jobs. So that is a very important, the regulation side is very important and a very crucial part of what we're looking at. And we're trying to work it through the traditional leadership structures, that we can go through the chiefs of the areas into the small scale farmers and manage it by that. But obviously it's a whole different system to anything that's run anywhere else in the world. The government is coming on board with that, but more they're asking us to set it up, which is a little bit unfair. But the big part for us as an industry is right now we have to prove demand. Right now we have to go to them and they're saying to us, okay, we hear you. We see the potential for this plant. We see what it can do, but tell us how you're going to do it. who's going to process it, who's going to manufacture it, what products you're going to do, where you're going to do it. And, obviously that is now going from a company and an industry that's been talking a lot and importing hemp fabric from China and chipboard from France and insulation from England and seed and oils from Canada and having a brand and selling a product to creating an industry. And going from advocacy into developing an industry is a massive shift. So right now we're at this crucial point. And the government is walking around the edges, but haven't yet given us the resources that we need to take it to that next level.
All right. Well, I would think that the surrounding environment that South Africa sits in, there's so much hunger. There are so many nations around South Africa who are starving and doing without, that we know this plant makes a tremendous healthy porridge, and the food that comes from it is amazing. And it also helps to create shelter so that those who cannot afford luxurious homes or even a hempcrete home can put together a nice canvas hemp tent. I would think that if for no other reason than for the survival of the most poor in our world today, that your government would be just on the bandwagon trying to save themselves and those around them.
Well, it's happening, and what I've noticed a shift in the when I go to the meetings. 5 years ago or 10 years ago, the word alternative was just like, hey man, that's alternative, that's hippie, we're not going to look at that. Right now, people going, what, you've got an alternative? Tell us about it. We want to hear about these alternatives because we're aware that if we carry on our current track, we're pretty much all stuffed. There's no ways we can carry on consuming the way we've been going. So all of a sudden, they're looking seriously at what we've got to offer. And, with, as I said, with the spirit of abundance in this plant, if we can just keep that going and communicate that and work together as an industry to actually build this, as I said, this massive hemp pie. Even if we get a small little slice of it for ourselves, for the rewards for the years we put in, it's beautiful if it comes out of a big pie. But people at the moment, you seem to be scrambling over the raw hemp dough that hasn't even gone into the oven yet. So I'd like to really speak to everyone out there in the industry who's listening. Let's keep it open, keep the information flowing, and remember why we got into this industry in the first place.
That's exactly right. And Tony, that's a really great lead in talking about how you move from, an activistic point of view, working with the government, making those changes. And then, as one of the things Teri hit on was, how do you have got to build that business plan. You need to know what those markets are, not only for yourself, but as you move forward with their industry. So, Tony, thank you so much. Everybody take time to go down and visit Tony if you ever have the opportunity to go to Cape Town, South Africa. Go to the store, go to the cafe, get your full Hemporium experience. So, Tony, thank you so much for sharing and encouraging the continuation of sharing within our industry. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and I hope to meet you all later in the year. I'm really hoping to get over that side, so thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And all right, so Boris Banas, are you out there?
Hey, Anndrea, I'm here.
Hi, Boris. Well, everybody, I'd like the opportunity to introduce Boris Banas with Hemp Seed Oil Europe. And Boris, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and what you've got going on now in Europe?
Well, first of all, I would like to thank you very much for having me here. It's a really big pleasure and an honor. My hemp experience practically beginning back when, 1997, I think, when I was in USA during my university studies, and I bought this nice little book from John Rulek called Industrial Hemp. And I said, wow, of course I knew cannabis, I knew something about hemp, but when I read this concentrated information about technical applications, I was amazed. So what we did, we decided to translate this little book in Slovak language. We did some fundraiser, published about 4,000 copies back in 1999, and we started to distribute this book free of charge to people. Try to build up the awareness of the Czechoslovak population and authorities about hemp. So this is where it all began.
All right, that's so great. And this is one of the things about North America helping, and John Rulak's little industrial hemp handbook really starting to shape a real change that happened in Slovakia. So tell us, what happened in Slovakia, and what was why not Hemp's involvement in this legislation?
Well, Slovakia became the member of European Union in 2004. And of course, there is this so-called common agricultural policy, which actually governs the cultivation of hemp in Europe. But individual governments may or may not apply these hemp rules. So still, industrial cannabis varieties were not sort of exempt from the toxic substance law. And it was already 2008, 4 years after we have joined the EU, and Slovak farmers could not grow hemp freely as their competitors in other European countries. I mean, they could grow it, but the licensing procedure was really a pain. So we decided, us, our organization, and other two, we decided to form sort of a pressure group, and we filed a complaint to Brussels, to the headquarters of EU. We filed a complaint against our government, and after a few months, our government had to make the amendment to the toxic substance law. So since 2009, our farmers can grow hemp, industrial hemp, as any other farmer in the EU.
Very interesting. Now, one of the things that sort of has reigned true throughout this conversation is talking about registered cultivars. How many registered cultivars are there currently in the EU list, and what's that based on?
Well, at this moment, we have 43 registered cultivars, and the bottom line is the THC content in dried flowering tops. This limit is 0.2% of THC. Of course, there is a common regulation that specifies sampling and testing methodology. And this is all performed by national agricultural authorities.
So there's a really good, solid working relationship between, the common agricultural policy, and a lot of that drives back to, which I know Boris is a member of, is the European Industrial Hemp Association, which really is the, European Hemp Association's voice when it comes to being in Brussels and help pushing these change, also with the help of people working on the ground in places like the Czech Republic and in Slovakia. Now, can you tell us a little bit about, how you transform from being, okay, I'm going to educate, I want to put this book out, we're going to, go to Brussels, we're going to make some change. So now what have you been working on, and what's your role now?
Well, about 4 years ago, I had to quit my previous job, which at the end seems like a blessing to me. So finally, I had time to really put all my energy into developing the hemp business. And, we met about 7 years ago at those AHA conferences, and the Canadian crowd started to talk about hemp food and how they have actually developed the North American hemp food market. So me and my partner, Michal, we suddenly saw a nice opportunity here. So we became involved with Hemp All Canada. That's who we represent now on European market. And we now put all our energy into marketing luxurious, the best hemp food in the world, in Europe.
And so tell me, what does the European hemp market look like? What percentage of that market is in the fiber side, and what percentage of that market is now to food? And are you seeing a shift to occur?
Well, first of all, we have to understand that hemp is still considered a fiber crop in Europe, right? So the majority of the acreage goes to the stalk production. Just to give you a perspective, last year, in 2012, the total cultivation area in Europe was 14,000 hectares, which is 35,000 acres, and only a small portion of it goes to the seed production. So, for instance, Europe produced 76,000 metric tons of hemp straw, but only 7,000 metric tons of the seeds.
All right. So, and are you starting to see, of course, as we've heard about market planning and, developing that market, are you starting to see an increase in the demand for food-based hemp products in Europe?
Oh, definitely, because as was already said, I think by Teri, the beauty of the social media allows you to really promote for very, very little budget all these topics. So the consumers are educated, the prejudices are being like torn down. So more and more people accept hemp food as a regular part of their diet.
And I think it's very interesting, when you're talking about, 10 to 15% of all available hemp seed in Europe is used in the food sector, but a lot of that goes into the animal feed and wild bird feed. Now, I think that this is something that really, that we in Canada and other parts of the world are looking to Europe as the lead, because right now we do not have permission to feed animals your livestock hemp food. So, that's something that we're always looking to Europe as the lead, and we're starting to see these changes here in Canada with getting hemp food registered as chicken feed, and now starting on our ruminant trial. So I know that you guys have some really interesting research. Can you tell me a little bit about the research that you've been doing as of late?
Oh, yeah. Actually, now it's already in the stage of product development, and it seems we are very, very excited about it. It seems we'll be the first one in the world to introduce the whole line of hemp food derived from the germinated hemp seed, which is very, very exciting.
Now, this is great, and I'll let everybody know that, the work that Boris and Mikkel have been working on and their team, this is really something to show that there still is room for innovation when it comes to production of hemp food. So we can take something, these guys have taken an idea and now, as you said, gone into market development. So can you tell us what's going to be, what kind of products are going to come out of this new sprouting project?
Well, actually, we will introduce a whole line of products, including germinated and dried whole seed. Then we are going to press the oil, which we are already doing during our trials. Then we would mill the press cake and produce the protein powders and even dehull the germinated seed. Well, you have to understand that we are not talking about real sprouting when the green thing comes out. We are only talking about soaking the seed in water long enough for enzymes to start do their biochemical changes in the seed. And then we have a technology already at hand which can dry the seed down real fast under the raw temperature, which then allows us to process the seed, the germinated seed, as it was a regular hemp seed, but with quite different nutritional properties.
And that's very interesting. And also, I'd like for you just to take a few moments to hit on what efforts are going on. This is another concept that has been running true throughout everybody, is looking at, the different types of cultivars that are going to be suited for different types of applications. So what kind of work are you doing now to try to, resolve and push forward with varieties?
Well, Europe is quite diverse in its climate, yes, and if we want to really introduce hemp into Central European environment, we need to test some varieties and learn and teach the farmers how to use these varieties properly. So at this moment, we are also involved with the government-sponsored Industrial Research Institute of Vegetable Crops, which we have hired to conduct a 3 to 4 year variety trial. We are now using 2 Polish varieties and a Finola variety from Finland, which is widespread in Canada, as you know very well. We would really love to incorporate some Canadian varieties, but this year, we just didn't have enough time to finish all the licensing, import and export licensing paperwork, because the officials really want to see the nice stamped hard paper copies, not just PDFs. So hopefully next year we will also add 1 or 2 Canadian varieties to this project, so we will know how they behave in our climate.
Now, Casper or Paul, do you have any questions for Boris?
Yes. The number of products that can be made is absolutely amazing. But example, I think is in Australia, they have food products made of hemp, but when they are marketed, on the bag or on the box, it must say, do not consume, this is not for edible, that type of thing. Yeah. Do you have those types of rules and regulations where you're at now, or are they pretty sane?
Unfortunately, not. Fortunately, not. The food, hemp seed is not governed by the United Nations Convention on toxic substances. So, from the perspective of the law or international engagements of individual countries, hemp seed is not a scheduled substance. But on the other hand, Europe does not have any common law or food safety policy with respect to the content of THC in the food. It's very good what you have in Canada and USA, so that there is an officially stated level of THC residues, which I believe is 10 ppm. So in some countries in Europe, we have these limits. For instance, in Germany and Holland, the limit is 5 parts per million. In Italy, for instance, they don't want to see any THC. So there is lots of paperwork involved. And in countries like Greece, people are prosecuted for importing hemp protein powder to their country. So it's rather silly still. Europe has to work a lot on this regulation side. At this moment, the only legal activity began with the animal feed certification, but it's still in progress. So there is it's a gray zone. We are probably walking on a thin ice, but since nobody is bothering, we just do what we want to do.
Well, and there's another industry that does spring up from the plant itself. One example is if there was a lot of harvesting of this particular plant all around the world, there would be a need for a decorticator, as an example, which could be built by a country like yours, by people like yours who need jobs that would be able to put together such a fine machine and export that. So I would think that your leaders would be able to see not only the benefit of the plant itself to help raise itself up out of an economic situation and to bring people jobs and better products, but it would also give them an opportunity to compete more so on the open market in areas that no one else is.
Oh, absolutely, because the perspective of the small farmers is very, very difficult with respect of hemp farming, because, for example, in Central Europe, which are like countries like Poland, Czechoslovakia, Austria, Hungary, there is almost no decortication facility. And if you want to really develop a nice business plan for, let's say, 600 hectares, you have to look at the investment of 5 to 6 million euros, and nobody's going to lend you money, because unless you have large-scale efficient technology, then you cannot deliver the fiber at the market price. So really, I agree with you. The small-scale decortication is the way to go to promote hemp growing.
Right. So where this comes back to talking about economies of scale and working with varieties that are suited to the environment, and also not only working with those varieties, but looking at what your end product's going to be. So I'd really like to thank Boris for taking the time today, and all of his colleagues in Europe, and all of the efforts that they've done over time, and Mikhail for keeping with it and continuing to do is what we've all said today is, sharing more about industrial hemp. So go over and visit hempseedoil.eu. The guys have really put together a great bit of information. They've got all kinds of great PDFs to download talking about hemp foods and their nutritional properties. So I'd like to thank you so much, Boris, for taking the time today, and hello to everybody there in Slovakia.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Do you guys have any questions for me, perhaps?
There is a large hemp industry that is thriving between the two countries in Canada and America, and it is quite amazing the amount of imports that are coming out of one country into the other. And that seems like a complete imbalance in trade, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we're seeing right now is that, as one of Summer said, textiles are huge in the United States. We know now that, hemp foods from Canada are moving all across the world. Tony said we're bringing hemp foods into South Africa. We're seeing them come into Australia. We're seeing them come, into the United States. So to balance that, we'll need more of that cultivation happening. Just yesterday, I was up in the Parkland region in Roblin at the Parkland Crop Diversification Foundation, and you can look up PCDF, Parkland Crop Diversification Foundation, and download many years of their extension work that they've been doing on industrial hemp. So any of the countries out there that are really looking at, how do I develop a research project? What would I look at in this research project? Looking at what the Parkland Crop Diversification Foundation has done in their extension work has been really vital in really shaping, the Canadian agriculture. But delivering that message is really important to the farmer and working with the farmer, because if the farmer doesn't have that ag extension, they're not going to know what varieties are going to work for me. What should be my seeding rate? Is there a new piece of machinery out there that I should be looking at? So that relationship between ag extension and the relationship between the producer is really vital. In addition to that, over the next couple of weeks, I will be gearing up to do the THC sampling here in Canada, and that is a requirement by our Canadian regulations, where you have to go into the field and pull the samples that are then sent off to the lab to make sure that plant is testing within our regulations at 0.3%. And this year in Canada, we're looking at around 50,000 acres to be licensed and cultivated across all of Canada. And part of what PCDF is doing is participating in a national variety trial. So we have a variety trial that's been going on all across Canada. And that's really showing that, one variety, as we've heard, one variety might grow well in one place. It might not perform so well in the other. So, that is a message running through also, is that, we really need to make sure that we're growing the variety or the cultivar that's really suited to our environment and into our end application.
What is the differentiation between those varieties, Anndrea?
Yeah, those are based on height. They could be based on the distance between the node. It really depends what your end product is. Based on seed size, that's based on 1,000 kernel weight, that's based on, height and stature of the crop, for instance. So they could be looking to have short stature cultivars that would be going for grain only, medium-sized cultivars that would be a dual-purpose type of cultivar for fiber and for grain or for seed, or really tall cultivars that would be deemed for fiber only. And now, talking about that fiber, I want to just turn the radio listening ears here to Greg Flavall. Now, Greg, why don't you tell us a little bit about Hemp Technologies and the work you've done in North America, and how now you've taken that back to New Zealand?
Well, it's been a fantastic journey, starting Hemp Technologies in Asheville, North Carolina, where we built the first permitted hemp home in America and the first passive house certified hemp house in the world, all made with hemp, which we had to, of course, bring in from Europe because it's not legal to grow in the United States. Absolutely absurd, but that's the way it is. Anyway, after getting a bit of traction there, I was invited to start the first hemp house in New Zealand down in Christchurch. I came down here in August of 2011, and the first morning I was here, there was an earthquake, so another one, of course, and we got rocked out of bed, and the whole project got put on hold for 8 months. So I came up to the area that I was born, which is Taranaki, and lo and behold, I felt like I was home, and it was legal to grow industrial hemp here. We got the first license to grow since 1938 in this area, and did a trial crop last year of 1 acre, funded by the third leading political party here, the Green Party, on a certified organic farm. And we got another license about 20 minutes from New Plymouth into the area called Uranui, which is another microclimate. And we grew 10 acres out there of both of these crops. We trialed with the Compulti dual-purpose seed, And we went in 23rd and 24th of November, which was about a month later than we should have gone in, really. And we didn't know that we were going to get a drought all through the summer. But lo and behold, we pulled out about a ton and a quarter seed off the 10 acres that we harvested in April. And that straw, interestingly enough, is sitting in the barn on the farmer's land, ready to be processed later this year when we start building the processing plant to build his daughter's house on the farm, all made with hempcrete. In the meantime...
You're talking about vertically integrating. You're talking about working with the farmer, growing the crop, harvesting it, now talking about getting into processing it and all the way into the home. So, Greg, can you tell us exactly what is hempcrete?
Well, hempcrete is a mixture of the soft inner core of the industrial hemp plant after the bast fiber has been stripped off it. It looks a little bit like wood mulch when you put it through the processing machine, and we mix that with some locally sourced and harvested limes and a little bit of water to make it stick, and then we place it or cast it in situ between temporary frames around the structural members of the house. That creates a monolithic, light concrete style infill and super insulating and high sound attenuation for a livable, breathable, beautifully clean air home. And, I might add, about 75 to 80% more energy efficient.
And so lots of people have questions about, what's the R value of hemp? How much is building with hempcrete going to cost? And, how long does it take to start to reap the benefits of that cost when it comes to this energy savings you're talking about?
Well, that's a really good question, Anndrea. Many people ask us this question, and typically the best answer to give is that it's comparable in construction costs to brick and block. If you're going out to build a brick and block home, which is around a balloon frame or stick-framed structure, it's going to cost you, in the United States, it'll cost you about $175 a square foot. And in fact, in some places, that cost is getting close to about $200 a square foot. In New Zealand, the average cost, for example, published by the New Zealand government for new house construction here is at $1,750 a square meter, or $175 a square foot in imperial terms. We are building the first 2 permitted hemp homes here at around $135 to $140.
Wow, so cheaper.
So actually, yes, I don't like saying cheaper. I mean, this is a premium product, Anndrea, but yes, less expensive. And that's including the fact that we've had to import the materials from our partner's farm in the Netherlands because we don't have enough material yet. That's something that we're working on for this next year, because we've got, in such a considerably short period of time, we're getting a lot of traction and a lot of interest for building hempcrete homes.
And so when somebody comes to Hemp Technologies and they say, I've read a little bit about this and, I think this is what I want to do, one of the questions that people often ask me is, okay, I'm in the U.S., I'm in Canada, I'm somewhere, and how do I go about this, and how do I get the building codes and get my permit? So can you talk a little bit about how that works and how that worked for the homes that Hemp Technologies worked on and with our colleagues in the United States?
Yeah, for sure. We first found out about the non-conventional building codes when we were working with some building scientists in Asheville, North Carolina, to build the Now House project. And we discovered, interestingly enough, that people, and it's not actually illogical, but people have been building mud huts, for years and years and centuries before we had building inspectors and building compliance and safety issues. And in every code, in every state, every region, every county, every town, they have to have included in there or grandfathered in the non-conventional or alternative building codes. That allows for new materials to be introduced under, obviously under scrutiny, and they have to comply, but it allows for everybody to go ahead and use, if they need to, alternative or non-conventional building codes. Interestingly enough, in New Zealand, we've done the same thing, using the non-conventional, or in here we call it the alternative building codes.
We are down to the last couple of minutes of the broadcast. We end at 54 minutes past the hour on the show. And I want to thank everybody for the amazing conversation that we have brought the world and making available a fantastic tool for education. And Paul, I want to say thank you too for being on the broadcast.
My pleasure. I've learned a lot listening to these folks. Thank you, Anndrea, for organizing such a great show, and nice to virtually meet you, Greg.
Hey, likewise. Talk again sometime.
Anndrea, if you had just one thing left to say to the Congress and the Senate and to the UN as to why industrial hemp needs to be reintroduced into the market, what would that be?
I would say that this is an agricultural crop that provides food and fiber for the health of our farms across the globe.
Thank you so very much. We ask that you let your friends know about this. You will be able to find this at the Time for Hemp website. Make it a point to share this MP3 with all your friends. And remember, the next time you hear me, you'll know that it's time for hemp. You are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. The only broadcasting network dedicated to ending the global war on drugs on iHeartRadio.
The third amendment that I'm going to offer, Madam President, I have not spoken about on the floor to date, and I want to take just a minute to describe what this amendment deals with. It's an amendment that I plan to offer that addresses the issue of industrial hemp farming. It is co-sponsored by Senator Rand Paul. It is identical to legislation in the other body with 33 bipartisan co-sponsors. This is, in my view, a textbook example of a regulation that flunks the common sense test. There is government regulation on the books today that prevents America's farmers from growing industrial hemp, and what's worse is this regulation is hurting job creation in rural America and increasing our trade deficit. When my colleagues get, I think, more information about this outlandish, outrageous restriction on free enterprise, I think most of my colleagues are going to say that the restriction on industrial hemp is really a poster child for dumb regulation. The only thing standing in the way of taking advantage of this very profitable crop is a lingering misunderstanding about its use. And the amendment that I have filed on this issue will end a ridiculous regulation once and for all. Right now, Madam President, the United States is importing millions of dollars of hemp products to use in paper products, construction materials, textiles, and a variety of other goods. We're importing a crop, Madam President, that the U.S. farmer could be profitably growing right here at home if not for government rules prohibiting it. Our neighbors to the north can see the potential for this product. In 2010, the Canadian government injected over $700,000 into their blossoming hemp industry to increase the size of their hemp crop and fortify the inroads, Madam President, fortify the inroads that the Canadians are making in U.S. markets at the expense of our farmers. It was a very good bet. U.S. imports have consistently grown over the past decade, increasing by 300% in 10 years, and from 2009 to 2010, they grew 35%. The number of acres in Canada devoted to growing industrial hemp nearly doubled from 2011 to 2012. Now, I know that there are going to be members of Congress and others who are listening to this, and they're going to say, all this talk about hemp is basically talk about marijuana. The fact of the matter is, while they come from the same species of plant, there are major differences between them. Major differences between them, and I want to just take a moment to recognize what those differences are and to focus on the benefits from producing domestically the hemp we already use. Under this amendment, the production of hemp would still be regulated, but it would be done by the states through permitting programs, not the federal government. 9 states have already put legislation in place to provide for a permitting system that enforces the prohibition on marijuana and ensures that industrial hemp maintains a very low THC level under 0.3%. The lowest grade marijuana typically has 5% THC content. The bottom line, Madam President, is no one is going to get high on industrial hemp. Now, hemp has been a profitable commodity in a number of countries. In addition to Canada, Australia also permits hemp production, and the growth in that sector helped their agricultural base survive when the tobacco industry dried up. Over 30 countries in Europe, Asia, and North and South America currently permit farmers to grow hemp, and China is the world's largest producer. In fact, our country is the only industrialized nation that prohibits farmers from growing hemp. Oregon is home to some of the major manufacturers of hemp products, including Living Harvest, one of the largest hemp food producers in our country. Business has been so brisk there that the Portland Business Journal recently rated them as one of the fastest growing local companies. Now, there are similar success stories in other states with industrial hemp. One company in North Carolina has been incorporating hemp into building materials, reportedly making them both stronger and more environmentally friendly. Another company in California produces hemp-based fiberboard. No country is better than ours at developing, perfecting, and expanding markets for our products. As the market grows, it ought to be domestically produced hemp that supplies that growth. Madam President, I'd just like to close on this topic with a couple of the statements by one of the leading newspapers in my state, the Bend Bulletin. And Madam President, I think it'd be fair to say that the Bend Bulletin would not cite itself as one of the first places that you ought to look for left-wing thinking. And here's what they had to say with respect to this proposition when they encouraged support for my amendment. I quote here, "Producers of hemp products in the United States are forced to import it. That denies American farmers the opportunity to compete in the market. It's like surrendering the competitive edge to China and Canada, where it can be grown legally." The editorial then goes on to say, and I quote, "Legalizing industrial hemp does not have to be a slippery slope towards legalizing marijuana. It can be a step towards removing regulatory burdens that limit Oregon farmers from competing in the world market." Madam President, I would ask unanimous consent that a copy of the editorial from the Bend Bulletin on this issue be printed in the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
So, Madam President, for a farm bill that empowers farmers and increases rural jobs, let's give them the tools that they need to get the job done. Let's boost revenue for farmers and reduce the overhead costs for the business around the country that uses this product. And let's put more people to work growing and processing an environmental-friendly crop with a ready market in the United States. Madam President, for all the reasons I've described, I will be urging my colleagues to support this amendment so the law can be changed and farmers are not prevented from growing a profitable crop in the future. Even though my amendment is about growing a crop and should be clearly relevant to the Farm Bill, it may be blocked from getting a vote because of the Senate rules on what amendments are allowed to be offered once cloture is invoked on the bill. If I get the opportunity, I'm going to bring this amendment up through the regular order, but if cloture is invoked and my amendment is not allowed, I want colleagues to know that I will be back at this again until there are smarter regulations in place for industrial hemp. Madam President, in closing, let me say that I don't think you can overstate the importance of the best possible Farm Bill. Senator Stabenow and Senator Roberts have, in my view, done yeoman work in trying to build a bipartisan approach. And the question now is, can we use the amendment process to improve on the kind of bipartisan effort they brought to the floor? In each of the areas that I've described this afternoon, the question of improving the farm-to-school program, the question of how we can take steps to wring more value out of the SNAP program, better nutritional outcomes, and then help a promising industry, the industry of industrial hemp. Each of these areas, Madam President, gives us a chance to attain the objectives of what I've described as the best possible farm bill without spending one single dime of additional taxpayer money. Not a dime of additional taxpayer money.
You are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. Please share us with your friends.
Speaker, in 1794, George Washington, our founding father, wrote to his gardener that he should, quote, make the most of the hemp seed and sow it everywhere, end quote. He wasn't alone. Thomas Jefferson grew hemp. Betsy Ross even made the first American flag out of hemp fiber. In fact, here's a flag right here that's made entirely from hemp. Today, U.S. retailers sell over $300 million worth of hemp-related goods. It's not just flags. Hemp is found in over 25,000 products, from lotions to soaps to protein bars to auto parts to fuel. Yet, somehow it's caught up in a completely unrelated drug war that prevents American farmers from growing this crop and forces us to import it from other countries. Our institutions of higher education can't even grow or cultivate hemp for research purposes. Mr. Speaker, my bipartisan amendment, which I'm offering with my good friends Mr. Thomas Massie and Earl Blumenauer, is simple. It would allow colleges and universities to grow and cultivate hemp for research purposes. Our amendment would only apply in states where hemp cultivation is already legal, such as my home state of Colorado. I recently had an exchange with the premier agriculture research university in my district, Colorado State University. This is an area that they want to get into, but they feel that they're prohibited, and their attorneys are telling them that unless we can make this change, they can't actually do research of what has great potential to be an important crop for Colorado. Mr. Speaker, let me be clear about something. Because there's been some misleading information that's been put out there by the Drug Enforcement Agency. Hemp is not marijuana. I'm very disappointed to hear that the DEA is circulating talking points that claim that somehow hemp could be used as marijuana. At the concentration level specified in our amendment, it's physically impossible to use hemp as a drug. Let me emphasize that. It's physically impossible to use hemp as a drug. Voters in my home state of Colorado and across the country have made it clear that they believe industrial hemp is an agricultural commodity, not a drug. Our colleges and universities are the best in the world. This is a modest step to simply allow them to research the potential benefits, downsides, strains to grow of this important agricultural commodity. There's been technology in France that allows tracers to be put in to ensure that it doesn't get contaminated with anything that includes narcotics. There's lots of research that can be done, and this amendment is is a very simple, pragmatic step to do it. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Colorado reserves his time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Iowa rise?
I seek time in opposition.
Gentleman claims time in opposition. He's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the gentleman's interest in the issue, but it's clear that the Agricultural Committee is not the committee of jurisdiction to be addressing the provisions of the Safe and Drug-Free Schools and Communities Act. And while some may consider the growth of hemp to be an agricultural endeavor, I think that there are many who feel quite differently. I would therefore oppose this amendment and urge the gentleman to seek a hearing on the issue within the appropriate committee. And I point also that one of the concerns that we have long had is that even though the gentleman says hemp is not marijuana, I don't know if one can tell the difference when it's planted row by row out in the field. And I know that's been a problem within my state when the residue of the leftover hemp from World War II became companions with the marijuana that was raised for a different purpose. So I'd reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves his time. Or the gentleman from Minnesota asked the gentleman.
I wonder if the gentleman would yield.
Oh, I'd be happy to yield the gentleman from Minnesota.
I wanted to, on that, the University of North Dakota, one of their ag guys up there, came up with a way to splice a fluorescent gene into hemp. And North Dakota is a state where it's legal. So now the hemp that grows is fluorescent. And so you can clearly tell the difference between the hemp and the marijuana. So we have solved that problem through research.
Gentleman yields back to gentleman.
Reclaiming my time in amazement and reserving the balance.
The gentleman reserves his time. Gentleman from Colorado.
Again, this is, of course, germane. It was ruled and ordered by the Rules Committee. There's no issue with the Committee of Jurisdiction. I'd like to yield the minute to the co-sponsor of the amendment, the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Massey.
Gentleman from Kentucky is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to talk about some of the legal products that you can buy in the United States that are made with hemp. You can buy paper, clothes, rope, food, hundreds of products. Even car panels are made out of hemp. But the great tragedy is that we cannot grow hemp in Kentucky. We can't grow it anywhere in the United States, industrial hemp. So we have to import it. Where do we import it from? It comes from China. It comes from Canada. It comes from Europe. There are many, many uses for hemp. There are 30 countries on this globe that can grow hemp. In fact, I believe every industrialized country in the world grows hemp. Farmers in Kentucky grew hemp during World War II. Hemp was grown in large quantities in my state of Kentucky. Canvas and rope made from hemp helped with the war effort. So this is not about drugs. This is not about a drugs bill. This is about jobs. And for Kentucky farmers, we need the opportunity. We need the opportunity to compete globally in a global market, and we shouldn't be denied this outlet for another productive crop in Kentucky. Thank you, and I yield back to the gentleman from Colorado.
Time the gentleman has expired. Gentleman from Iowa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized for as much time as he may consume.
And I also would like to remark, the gentleman from Colorado, it wasn't a surprise to me to see that Colorado is the state that has legalized marijuana. And so we also see the advocacy for this come from the same place.
Will the gentleman yield for a moment?
I would in a moment. Perhaps it's a coincidence, but I'll give you two things to respond to. And the other one is the reference to George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and Betsy Ross. Quite curious. And I don't think we advocate all the things that they might have participated in. 2 out of 3 of those would have fit within a category of an ownership that I don't really care to bring up today, even though today is Juneteenth. So I'd yield to the gentleman from Colorado.
In addition, Colorado did legalize recreational use of marijuana. It also separately has legalized industrial hemp. So there are a number of states, more states that have legalized industrial hemp that have done anything with regard to recreational use of marijuana or even medicinal use of marijuana. All very different issues, and states are taking them up as we speak.
And reclaiming my time, I recognize that the gentleman's amendment only applies to states that have already legalized it. And that's true. Nonetheless, I urge opposition to this amendment, Mr. Chairman, under the basis of this, that we haven't had a full hearing on this. We don't have a knowledge base behind it. We have each our own understanding of it. Mine is a debate that I have seen that's gone on for years, which is when you plant hemp alongside marijuana, you can't tell the difference. And so it opens up the door for the recreational agriculture of the marijuana drug, and for that reason alone I oppose it, but I'd urge the gentleman to seek a hearing in the appropriate committee and urge the defeat of this amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from Colorado.
I'd like to inquire of the chair how much time remains on both sides.
The gentleman from Colorado has 1 1/2 minutes remaining. The gentleman from Iowa has 2 minutes remaining.
Okay, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Barr.
The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We should explore the opportunity to produce industrial hemp here in the United States. This amendment would allow us to take a first step, carefully and deliberately. It will allow research institutions in our states, including my home state of Kentucky, to grow industrial hemp for the purpose of agricultural research, helping provide the information we need to consider future expansion of production. Our states deserve this opportunity to demonstrate the usefulness and viability of this crop for our farmers. Kentucky was once the nation's leading producer of industrial hemp. I encourage and support the passage of this amendment. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back to the gentleman from Colorado. The gentleman from Iowa.
Reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from Colorado.
I yield the remainder of the time to the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Blumenauer.
The gentleman from Oregon is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, and I appreciate the leadership of my friend from Colorado and my friend from Kentucky in moving this forward. 19 states have passed pro-industrial hemp legislation. 9 states removing barriers to its production altogether. As has been pointed out, these products are perfectly legal in the United States, some $300 million a year, but it just has to be grown someplace else. It's outrageous that American farmers can't produce it, but what this amendment does is to simply permit the research opportunities for college and universities to grow and cultivate hemp for academic and in agricultural research purposes. If this amendment passes and we're able to do this research in agricultural colleges and universities, then we're not going to have stupid talking points coming from DEA, and we'll have misleading statements that are made. People will understand why other countries have been able to figure this out, and the United States will be able. Nobody, regardless of your position, should be opposed to allowing our research colleges and universities to be able to do a deep dive to be able to find out what's possible.
Look
at all that money, yeah, the money that they spent. Take another look and spend some time for him. Don't cut trees for paper, cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yes, it's time for him. Whoa, an acre of hemp makes 20 bales of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rent. Well, time for help! Yeah!
You are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. Please share us with your friends.